Okay, welcome to the video where we are going to reassemble the Youngs Ambidex No. 1. Rebuild the reel completely to the finished vintage product. Okay, so reassembly of the drum. Essentially here you've got a fibre washer, which I didn't take off when I was disassembling it. Put the bearings over. You got to be really careful not to lose these bearings, because you're unlikely to be able to get replacements from Youngs Ambidex because it's just too old. However, you probably can get replacement pieces that are not from Youngs. You can probably get ball bearings from eBay, for example, if you've run out of bearings and you can't seem to get a hold of any. So that goes over there like that, and then there's a fibre washer, which I'm not sure if this is original because it's quite a tight fit, and typical reels of the day would have had a washer that was made of red fibre rather than Teflon, which is kind of what this is. But these reels were made up as late as the 60s, so it could well be that this is just a later model. Okay, so after fitting the fairly tight Teflon washer, you need to insert the locking screws for this, and that is a bit of a tricky operation, but it's not as difficult as you might think. And you have to get the second one on before you start doing any tightening, because once you've tightened it to a reasonable degree, the end of the shaft comes out too far and you can't get the other one on, so you need to make sure that you've at least got it into the position. So we then tighten this without the other. You got to tighten the inner one first without the other one, and the experience tells me from repairing Duco reels, which is very similar to this, you need to leave about 1 millimetre slack. If you don't leave enough slack on these, essentially what you get is the reel is impossible to wind. It's because it's too stiff, but you don't want it to be too slack, obviously. So it's not critical to have that mega tight. And then what you want to do is jam a screwdriver in here and then tighten up the lock nut, which is not difficult to do actually. Okay, so that's reassembly of the drum with the bearings. Now the bearings generally would have grease, and you'd put grease on here too. Okay, here's a quick shot of the greased bearing, and this is using Penn reel grease, which is especially formulated not to go hard. Okay, this is the greased spiral, and there's been reel oil put onto the sliding area just here and here. Okay, so reassembly of the central body. Essentially what you're doing is you're putting the shaft back in, we're putting the cog set back in. This piece at the top here is called a cam. The cam goes upwards, and these splines here go into the splines that are on the shaft there. And then you add this part here, and if you rattle it around with a screwdriver and find out where it settles, and then screw it back on. You see this hole here? You're now ready to put the pin back. So what you do is you need to push the cam rider, which is this piece here, hold it with your thumb, push the spring back in that direction, and then pull the hole on the shaft until it just comes through that little fork just there, which has just moved. It's just there, and then you put the pin through there. Okay, so once that's all done, the thing you need to do now is just put the pin back in, and that just rests like that, and that's it. It goes through the hole on the main shaft. Right, replacing the cover plate is relatively simple. It's fairly tight on the shaft there, and this particular area is a sliding part. There's no bearings inside there, it's just a brass runner, so that needs to have oil on it. Not grease, oil. Okay, so there are 2 screws. I'm attempting to do this whilst looking through the camera, so it is a bit fiddle. And that's your cover plate on, essentially. As far as I'm aware, there's no gasket, and it is a very close fit, so you shouldn't get any grit and oil juicing through that. Okay, so to replace the oil cover, it's just spring loaded, and that just goes back like so. And this goes on that way, I think. and then you basically screw down the this is the shaft cover for the side that you're not using. This reel is called the Ambidex because you can put the handle on either side. Okay, so to reassemble the handle, Bakelite knob on this, which kind of tells you it was probably made in the 1930s or maybe the 50s, I'm not sure, but they are quite old now, these reels. So there's a threaded shaft for the knob, which sometimes called a PEM shaft or a pillar shaft, because you can tighten it up and it'll still be slack because it's designed to rotate when you wind the fishing reel. Now there's a flatted shaft on here, so it will only go on one particular way. It's worth noting that the reason this is called the Youngs Ambidex is because it's ambidextrous. If you what that means, then look it up in a dictionary, but essentially what it means is you can use either right or left hand wind on this reel. So you can put this handle onto there, you take that off, put it onto there, and then put that on the other side, and then you can wind the reel right-handed or left-handed. It doesn't really matter, it will still work. Okay, so reassembly of the bail arm. Essentially the bail arm just slides through the slot there. You need to put the bar screw in, which with this little screw, this little screw here, clicks off a bar underneath the drum, and that is what essentially triggers your bail arm to flick over. So you need to put that back in, and then into this slot here you have the half cut screw, which I'm pretty sure will get in there. Gonna have a laugh with some of these videos, eh? Okay, so the half cut screw is now in, and it needs to be rotated so that you can get the other screw in. It's best to be as tight as possible. It's actually what's called a captured PEM or a pillar screw, so it's you can't over tighten it, so it doesn't matter if you have it down fairly tight. So next off is the locking screw. So you need to make sure the half cut screw, it just sits so that the locking screw can go down and stop it from rotating. And that's your bail arm assembled. I would actually tighten this one as tight as you can get it and still get this on. Okay, so now what we're going to do is replace the counterweight. And the counterweight goes onto the spring there, you can just see it there. So it needs to be inserted behind the spring, like so. And slide it along till you feel the screw clicking in place. And then screw it down. And then that's the spring for your bail arm in place too. Okay, so reassembly of this particular section, this doesn't have any flats on it. So this is the bit that can spin depending on how much pressure the drag adjuster puts onto the reel. And this is the drag adjuster, so you essentially twist this until it's as tight as you need it to be, so that this spins with the right amount of drag for the fish. And you just need to lift the bail arm out of the way so that you can get the spool onto the reel. And that essentially completes the video. That's the fully assembled Youngs Ambidex #1.